Welcome to Norse Code, the number one podcast for you Minnesota Vikings. I'm your host producer. My name is James Pikoshnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And on the other end of the tin can and string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from the Wide Left Substack. He is Mr. Useful Human, Arif Hassan. Arif, have you ever hugged an Italian person before?
Look, it's very easy to, on a grainy image at an exclusive adults-only resort, to hug an Italian person and just come away with the wrong impression. It's happened to all of us.
Who let he use without grainy sin cast the first stone. Unbelievable.
What a week for journalism.
In quotations, really. For those who have missed it, I don't even know if we want to have its own section, but the Rossini-Vrabel, there's so much potentially that could happen as a result.
You know how scandals used to be called affairs in like newspapers in the 60s? What an apropos name, the Rossini affair. Right?
As it turns out, the Rossini affair is absolutely a thing here. And problematic for Mike Vrabel, to say the very least, being potentially caught in this. Because for a while it was a fair, and then in like the 90s, everything turned into Gate.
Right. Yeah.
Like that's not gonna.
And
that's
we're
not
still
gonna
recovering from we haven't dropped Gate entirely, but we're doing a better job of not automatically going to Gate. It took a while. We had to survive through the 2000s and a little bit of the 2010s where they did it, but I think we're through Gate.
Yeah, we're firmly back in the affair situation. So Diana Rossini, who spent most of last year declaring that Aaron Rodgers was going to sign with the Vikings, has moved her attention towards Mike Vrabel, who on multiple occasions has put out pretty interesting tweets about Mike Vrabel. The year he didn't get signed as a coach, and she had said that she had spoken with somebody at the Senior Bowl about why Mike Vrabel wasn't hired, and the reasoning was because he was too big and like an imposing presence.
Man.
There's some fun tweets if you go deep into her listing.
There's a video I think from 2021 where she talked about like, hey, it makes sense that Mike Vrabel's always tweeting about his wife. I mean, she's hot. If my husband was attractive, I tweet about him all the time. Hey, man, what is that? What are you doing?
The picture that got posted on, I forget if it was Twitter or Blue Sky, that showed that was the image of Tiger Woods in the front seat of the cop car, and it was just like that exhausted look, and it said something along the lines of like Diana Rossini's husband waiting for her to get back from an exclusive trip.
God, man. It's the beginning of the show.
It is the beginning of the show. We're not off the rails. No, this is all oddly enough topical.
Right.
So, I mean, I don't know how many Italian people you have hugged.
Sorry, Sarah Sivian this was a joke tweet, right? Like, I
want to believe so.
Yeah. Sarah Sivian tweets out, sorry, but I have to say some of the commentary on the quote situation with a certain NFL coach is completely ridiculous. Have you ever hugged an Italian person before? Stop and ask yourself if you're falling for a double standard. There are hit pieces now. And this is the part, so that part was like very funny, but the next part made me think maybe it's not a joke. There are hit pieces now on right-wing websites about a harmless one-off joke she made months ago as if it was an actual crime, all because of a picture of a hug, which I love following Sarah. She's great. She does really great hockey reporting. I follow her Substack. So I don't want to go push back too hard or anything like that. But like they interlaced hands, right? Like the hug was like you do the hug, and it's like I've seen people hug. It could be very platonic, obviously. And then the hug ends with them pulling apart with enmeshed hands, which is intimate. Like I've not seen a hug like that wasn't more than platonic.
Like that's the sort of thing where if that happens in your friend group, you're like, oh, well, those two are together.
Oh, okay. Is there something you want to tell the friend group? Right? Like, They're
we're
all
here
right.
for board games. You're apparently not. Okay.
Which is fine, but like that's a new dynamic now.
Yeah, you do kind of have to run it by the rest of the polycule, but fine.
Oh, all right.
And with that, welcome to this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys are all doing well. We have some draft stuff to talk about. The draft is happening here in just a couple of weeks. So Arif brought on Alex Katson. He'll be discussing some draft stuff. And we have the mailbag as well. But before we begin, thank you guys so much for listening to Norse Code. If you enjoy the show and would like access to things like the bonus episode, the Discord, all of that, you can go over to patreon.com/norsecode. For $3.50 a month. Hey, the pain kills are kicking in. Pain pills.
All right.
Yeah. You get access to all that. So patreon.com/norsecode. Somebody actually posted that they prefer the episodes of Norse Code when I'm on pain pills. I do not. Let me be perfectly clear. I do not. You can also go to paypal.me/norsecode for a one-time donation, or you can go over to norsecode.threadless.com for any number of wonderful pieces of Norse Code merch, including the puzzle, which if you get it at the right size, you can just single out Arif on the Arif body pillow portion of it. As we discovered this last week.
So do we think that? So it got posted on Blue Sky, and I have many objections. One of which is that I'm wearing only a thong in the puzzle, and also that I'm on a body pillow, among probably several other objections. But the one I chose to voice, which is probably fourth or fifth on my list of objections. Is that I am depicted multiple times in this puzzle. There's multiple images of me as a white guy. And so I want to know, do we think that was a printing error unique to that specific puzzle that got shipped out? Or do we think that that's on Threadless?
I think that's on Threadless.
Oh, good. Great.
The picture, because other images from that were shown in the Discord. And it did.
We were comparing and contrasting puzzles. That's
right. we were comparing and contrasting that the image that he was showing to what the actual logo was, or the image that was put up, and it did brighten it up considerably. So even Dusty, who is a ghost in there and a ghost in real life, but
he got washed out of all things.
He got washed out pretty good. So
okay.
So I apologize. I apologize that it changed your ethnicity. I hope this does not.
What a sentence, man!
Well, this is where we're at. As the person who uploaded the image, I uploaded the correct one without whitewashing anything. So I apologize that Threadless has done this.
I trust you on that one, because that's. That is a lot of stupid effort to go through to whitewash the image. The picture on the website, which we have to be clear, they didn't make a puzzle and then take a picture of it and put it on the website. They clearly just like digitally added the image that James uploaded onto a blank puzzle, obviously. First of all, has Dusty as ghost colored, which we all know is a faint blue.
That's canon.
Yeah, and I am, well, as I always am, ethnically ambiguous, but I'm certainly not obviously white, right? Like
that's not something people just look at you and just see immediately.
Right, yeah, and on the image that's on the website, I appear to be the appropriate amount of not obviously white. So it is in the printing process or like obviously the ingestion of the image, but the image that's uploaded certainly looks like it is at least appropriately colored. As much as I would love to blame you or Draw Play Dave, how much I would love to blame, well, Luke, obviously, but how much I would love to blame Draw Play Dave. Words can't express the degree to which that would make my day. But it very much seems like the evidence is not there to support such an allegation.
Nope. This is not on Dave. This appears to be on Threadless. Apologies. But if you'd like to get this wonderful piece of merch that we have discussed.
A rare chance for a white Arif.
Yep. If you'd like your... No, that is not a sentence I want to start saying.
No,
anyway,
finish it.
Well, if you're inviting it, if you'd like to have your Arif White, please go over to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up the puzzle of the 10-year anniversary image. And with that, let's get into the show itself. I don't know how we recover from that, but we're going to go over to an interview that Arif conducted earlier today with Alex Katson from Wide Left, Chargers Wire, and Football Sheets. And we'll be back with the mailbag.
Cool. So I'm here with special teams pervert Alex Katson. He's also the COO, I guess, of Wide Left. I got to look into our org structure to see if that's still true. He writes for Chargers Wire, Huskies Wire. He records data for Football Sheets, and he also does a podcast for the Chargers with Guilty as Charged, right? So he has about as many jobs as I did 6 years ago, I guess.
Yeah, that sounds about right. As far as I know, I'm still the COO at Wide Left. I would hope that I still am, because we just had a board meeting earlier this week, or was that last week? I don't remember what week it was.
It was this week, yeah.
Yeah, it was like 2 days ago. And I was still presented as the CEO in that meeting, so I
That's
think
crazy.
so.
That's wild. Who did that?
Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, I'm
It was
all
a
over
great
the
board
place. I'm
meeting.
doing all sorts of shit.
We were like, yeah, so our conclusion is that we should write more articles. It was an incredible board meeting.
Right. Yeah, it was a really productive board meeting. We're really good at business. I think we're sort of like the preeminent business people in the industry, which sounds not true based on what you just said about what happened in that meeting. But there are many companies, as we've profiled on Wide Left, that have not come to this conclusion. So actually, I'm being serious.
I just reread through my Draft Network piece because it was actually relevant to something I was doing in a completely unrelated group chat. And dog, it's crazy how bad you can be at being a company.
Yeah, not like us. We would never like do that.
Okay, so I brought you on without a plan in mind, but I figured we both do like spreadsheets for the draft. As like a notable thing that we do. So like, what is Football Sheets?
So Football Sheets is a continuation of the spreadsheets that I have operated since 2021 or 2022. I can't even remember what year it was at this point, but for a long time, I have maintained sort of a collection of spreadsheets going all the way from college football to the NFL. So I have a spreadsheet that tracks college football during the season and which players are transferring and which players are declaring for the draft and who's going back to school and all these sorts of things. And then there's spreadsheets for what's happening at all-star games and how are guys measuring in at those events and, how do they do at the combine and how are they doing at pro days and things like that, and who's getting picked and who's signing with what team as an undrafted free agent. And then there's spreadsheets for coaches. You're in the NFL now. What's happening in the NFL transactions, and and there's some stuff with the coaching side of that as well for both NCAA and for both NCAA and the NFL. And so it's really the way that I equate it. Essentially, is if you think about for the draft specifically, you think about like most media people that do draft coverage, you are doing either focusing on one team, or if you are like the Dane Bruglers of the world, or like our friend Corey Kinnan, who runs the Daft on Draft Substack, or whoever you may be, that's doing like a draft guide as an independent media, or as a media not affiliated with a team. When I say independent media, those people are essentially trying to present their work as if they are an NFL team doing scouting for the draft. And there's a whole bunch of challenges that come with that, because you are one person and you are, in most cases, evaluating on a general basis rather than evaluating for a specific fit or a specific team the way that a team is. Because a team doesn't really give a shit about how generally talented a player is if they don't fit the scheme that the team runs. And so you are doing all of this work already of, 10 to 12 scouts and personnel people in an NFL building. And those 10 to 12 scouts and personnel people also have scouting assistants and areas assigned to them and all of these different things where they keep track of all these things of how did a guy test at his pro day? How is this guy in the draft? Did he transfer? Where is he? What happened to him? Where did he go? And if you are a media person writing a draft guide, you don't always have access to that information in a very clear way. And so the reason I started Football Sheets in its primordial form, which was just a collection of Google Sheets that I had a link to a folder, and you could just access it from my Twitter account.
Access to it, you'd update like who is subscribed to the Patreon and manually change who had access to it based on if your subscription was current.
Exactly. And even before that, it was free. You could just click a Google Sheet that was linked on my Twitter account. You could have access to it for free. And then eventually it became a paid thing on Patreon where I updated all that manually. And now it's on Football Sheets. And so if you've seen it before on my Twitter or on wherever, like that's where it is now if you didn't know that. But the very first version of that was born out of the fact that I was also doing draft content, which I still do. And this information is not easily accessible. And so I found myself looking at 6 or 7 different sources of like, you know, draft declaration trackers of like, did this guy declare? A whole bunch of trackers had all of these players that technically declared but were out of college eligibility, and so they didn't have a choice. And so it wasn't really notable that they put out a graphic that they were declaring for the draft, because like the other option was that they were getting a real job, which in fairness to those people that include those on the trackers, I guess that like in 2020, Purdue quarterback Elijah Sindelar did decide to be an electrician instead of going to the draft. So
right. Classic.
Sure, I guess like sometimes that's important, but most of the time it's not very notable. And so I had a really hard time collating all of this information. I ended up just doing it for me and my friends because we needed it in order to do our job in quotes there, but in order to do our job. And it just kind of continued to spread from there. And now I do it for a group of, I don't know how many people, a lot of people, and a lot of people in higher places than you would maybe imagine, that you would think maybe have access to resources and staffing that they wouldn't need such a thing. But
the kind of institutional affiliation that you would think comes with access to this data kind of organically, but instead it's been farmed out to an overworked pseudo contractor who's not
right. Instead, they pay me for it. And so essentially I am acting as your entire set of scouting assistants that you would have in an NFL building, which normally a team has anywhere from like 3 to 5 of those people, to my understanding, depending on the team. I mean, unless you're like the Bengals and then you have like one guy, but like, you know, I guess 1 to 5, you know, to widen the range to be generous, but like anywhere from like 1 to 5 people, like I am doing that for the media people that are doing the job of anywhere from 10 to 12 personnel scouting people, depending on how you look at it. And so that's essentially what Football Sheets is.
Great. So that kind of leads into, and you already covered this in your kind of description of what it is, but like it kind of leads to this question of like, you know, what we're both doing and like, why does it matter? Like, again, having access to information about whether or not some guy is becoming an electrician or famously a Lowe's employee, like intuitively it's like pretty relevant, but like, I think that kind of the concentration of information is one of the technologies that we've like taken for granted over the course of our lives that now has suddenly become relevant again in a space where there is no concentration of information, especially for you with college football, especially where information is, I'm not going to say necessarily at a premium, but the ability to access it quickly and easily is, right? So like what value do you provide, do I provide in offering this kind of service in a way outside of just, hey, is this guy eligible to be in the draft or whatever? Like, what does that kind of give us?
Well, like you mentioned, it's the concentration of information, right? Like, yes, we are used to having that concentration of information, but also like we are the concentration of information. That's why people are used to having it, is because we are doing it. If we weren't doing it, someone else probably would be doing it, but if that person also wasn't doing it, there wouldn't be any concentration of information. And you just have to wait until the NFL puts out a list and says, like, hey, these are the guys that declared for the draft. But even when the NFL does that, they only count players who are juniors or lower in class status. And this is important right now, especially because of the NCAA's rules. And so with COVID eligibility and all the different lawsuits that you see in terms of like nobody knows what the NCAA eligibility rules are anymore. And so there are a bunch of fourth year seniors, fifth year seniors, sixth year seniors that are declaring for the draft with additional eligibility remaining that could make a decision to go back to school for another year. And when those players do make a decision to go back to school for another year or declare for the draft, that is not reflected in the official information provided by the NFL when they put out the list of here's the guys that declared for the draft. Because the NFL is only concerned with special eligibility cases, which are players who are a fourth year junior or below, because either they have not satisfied their degree requirements or the NFL has a list of guys of like, these are fourth year juniors. They satisfied their degree requirements. They're declaring with eligibility remaining by NCAA, by like our antiquated understanding of what the NCAA rules are, which is the 5 to play 4 rules pre-COVID. So right now it has a ton of value because most media people, it's very difficult to do that and also all of your other things that you need to do in your job to keep track of those things. And so it is also difficult for me to do that, but I also get paid to do it. So right. I might as well do it.
Right, you're dedicating a portion of your day exclusively to that so that other people have time savings and that gets multiplied out, which is why it's a money-making endeavor.
Correct. Yeah. And so it is important in that sense in terms of like it is the concentration of information. You can go there and you can see like, OK, this guy decided to transfer instead of declaring for the draft, or he went back to school, or he did this or he did that, or he's in the draft. OK, cool. Like I like know that I need to write him up now. And so I have a ton of people like there's this huge surge of people that subscribe around like November, December, January when the draft deadline begins to hit, because they're like, well, I need to cross check all of my lists to make sure that I'm watching the right guys before I go to the Shrine Bowl, the Senior Bowl, the Combine, all of these things. There's a huge influx of people in March who want the Pro Day results because Pro Day results are not public. The results that you see on your Twitter timeline are not the official Pro Day results. They're results that are released by the school or an agent or the player themselves or by the player's teammates who are hand timing things on their iPhone at the Pro Day, or by reporters who are hand timing their events on their iPhone at the Pro Day. Like,
which doesn't rule.
Right. It's from a bunch of different secondary sources that are not official. And there is an official table of Pro Day results. You know, people will tell you all the time, there's no official Pro Day results. That's not exactly true. The NFL does distribute a report. It's called the APT. And I wrote about this last year for Wide Left before I was officially like a real employee of the company. But so if you have more questions about what that is or how Pro Day reporting works, you can go back and read that piece. But essentially the APT, which nobody knows what it stands for. The APT is a report that the NFL teams generate that is usually generated by the scouting assistants and low-level scouting personnel that attend Pro Days. And so each Pro Day designates a timing scout and a data entry scout. Sometimes that is the same person, sometimes it is a different person, but they are always going to be from the same team. And so it might be one guy from a team that is local to the Pro Day. It might be one guy that is from a team that just so happens that like that's the first guy that gets the Pro Day. It might be that there's two guys that are at the Pro Day and one is the data entry scout and one is the timing scout. And essentially Pro Days operate on a wisdom of the crowd model where it is an aggregate time for all of these events. Like there are certain things that have discrete measurements like the vertical jump and the broad jump and height and weight and all these things that can be measured discretely. And so they don't need to be like consulted on. But for the 40 and the 3-cone and the shuttle, you take every scout that's in attendance, you ask them, hey, what did you have on your stopwatch? And you come to a consensus about like, that's about the median time. I think that's what we're going to go with. And so another common thing you'll see all the time is that you need to add 0.05 or 0.08 or point whatever to Pro Day 40 times in order to compare them to Combine times or in order for them to be accurate or what have you. And that's not true. That's not mathematically correct because The scouts at the pro day are already doing that. You only have to do that for times that are reported by questionable sources. But if they're being reported by Dane Brugler, for example, who has access to the APT report, all the times on The Beast, on the Athletics huge mega draft guide that just came out earlier today as we're recording this, all of those times are from the APT report. If you were getting those times from Daniel Jeremiah or someone like that has access to the APT report, those times are the times. You don't need to do any sort of adjustments to the times in order to make them more correct than they were before, because the scouts are already doing that at the pro day. And a lot of people don't have that understanding of that. And so that's also a value that the concentration of information comes with, because there are not very many people that have access to the APT report. I'm very lucky that I happen to know people that do get it and are willing to send it to me in order to disseminate out to the people as part of Football Sheets. And that is like a huge driver of the business, because you can't find them anywhere else. It's not, you can't, like, the only other place that you can find them is on Draft Scout, which is a website that was made in 2003. And also the 40 times on Draft Scout are averaged. And so the 40 time presented as the final time on Draft Scout a lot of times is not a time that a player ran. It's just the in-between between the first two times. And I haven't gotten a chance to talk to the Draft Scout guy about this. I doubt I ever will. But I assume that what that is part of the, like, well, you need to adjust pro day times in order for them to be correct. And so if you're adding another 0.05 or 0.08 or what have you onto the time that's on Draft Scout, you are double counting the correction for a pro day time. And so a lot of my job ends up being education around a lot of this stuff, around like, hey, like, the information is concentrated here, but also, like, how do we parse this information? What do we do with this information? And, you know, like, that's a huge part of my job also. And that's why it has a ton of value, because, like, most people don't know that. Like 90% of people, I would say even 90% of people in the media don't necessarily know that. And so you have to go through that and have to say, and like, it comes up every year, right? Of like, oh, well, pro day times aren't comparable to combine times. Yes, they are. Like,
so what's interesting about this is that I have run the numbers on this one, specifically on people who have run both a 40 at the combine and a 40 at their pro day. And I haven't done this for like 5-6 years. Maybe the data has changed, but the most recent accounting I have. So I didn't have access to the APT. I had access to Draft Scout or kind of someone who scraped Draft Scout website, which I will say Draft Scout is only okay at preventing scraping, but they're not the worst in the world. But doing that, I expected to see pro day times to be faster, not because of what you mentioned, that people seem to think that there's, you know, that they happen to time faster, but because you only rerun if you think you can run faster, right?
Right.
And so, which is one reason to be suspicious of this kind of data anyway, because you don't actually know what's behind it. And so you have to come up with a couple of reasons and see if you can test against it. You know, on average, the difference was like 0.01 seconds, negligible at all. And it fully explained by the selection bias of people who run fast 40s at the combine choosing not to run again. And there was only one or two schools where it was faster. And you would actually expect that on a distribution level, right? Because if on average, you know, the time is going to be the same when you run it at either instance, there are going to be some schools that are slower and some schools that are faster. So nothing notable appeared to me, except I think it was like Ohio State, which everyone already has a good joke about anyway. But I think that the APT thing is super interesting, or the Draft Scout thing was super interesting when I was editing this piece that we'll link in the show notes about like averaging the times. I found that like really interesting, because very often when you have a wide range, because they run the 40 twice, right? So when you have a wide range between the first 40 and the second 40, sometimes that's because conditions change between the first 40 and the second 40. Like a gust of wind, right, is now blowing directly into the player's face on the first 40 or the second 40, which is why you run it twice, right? They used to have them run in opposite directions outdoors. I don't know if they still do. And sometimes, you know, maybe then it's appropriate to average because then you're doing wind in both ways, but I don't know. But there's a reason, like you said, that scouts confer and come up with the time. But the numbers don't tell us that there is any reasonable difference, even though that's kind of like logged wisdom for what we do, which makes it always interesting to me when people choose to either throw out pro day times when they're doing some athletic testing or whatever, or only use the pro day times when they're filling in for the lack of combine times, which gives a soft incentive for players to just not perform at the combine if the supposition is true that you're going to do worse at the combine at the pro day because someone's going to load you with 224 pound plates instead of 225 pound, right? Like
Right.
I don't know. It's interesting, but also I think that the process by which this data gets recorded, fascinating to people who happen to be the kind of people who listen to this podcast, but also I think should really inform our understanding of the way this process like plays out.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a couple of different stories that I can tell about that. So
Let's go.
the APT will log weather conditions, the type of turf that you ran on, whether it was inside or outside, like all of these different things. There's all these different factors that it also has information on. And so a lot of the times, if wind is over 10 miles an hour or so, they'll have you run in both directions outside, like you mentioned. And so in that case, averaging 40 times, I think, is relatively reasonable because you're trying to get a sense for, what the wind effect was essentially. Sometimes there are tracks that are famously a little bit downhill. Like I think Virginia Tech was one that it's like famously sloped a little bit downhill where like you can run a faster 40 going one way because you're running downhill. There's also like people bring up Jake Bobo's 40 time all the time. The fact that he ran a 4.9 and went undrafted and ended up on the Seahawks as an undrafted free agent and is carved out like a, what is now a second contract NFL career. Jake Bobo only ran a 4.9 at UCLA's Pro Day that year because UCLA at the time did not have an indoor practice facility and it rained in LA the entire week before UCLA's Pro Day. And so the field was completely waterlogged. It was pouring rain when UCLA's Pro Day occurred. And so you could not run any faster than that. Like it was impossible to run faster than a 4.9 because you were running through a puddle, like you were running through water. And so like that 40 time is not real. But that's the 40 time that gets logged. It's the 40 time that's official. It's the 40 time that shows up on the beast, and it lacks essential context, and sometimes, like you'll get a throwaway line or someone will put out a tweet of like, oh man, well, it was pouring at UCLA this year. And so like, I don't know, but like that story does not survive along with the time, right? Like that's only for nerds. By the same token, right, there's a lot of schools that have slower turfs, especially lately because of how quick the turf is at the combine now with the new turf at Lucas Oil, right? Like this has been a point of discussion the last few years. The track seems to be getting faster and faster and faster at Lucas Oil Stadium, but there's a lot of tracks around the country that are slow. Washington, which is a program that I cover, is one that is notorious among players for being a slow track. And so Washington's top two prospects this year did not run a 40. They didn't run at the combine because they were not comfortable doing so. And they just didn't run at the pro day because they were like, well, my time is going to suck. And so what is the point of running the 40 at my pro day? Because Dempsey Indoor is well known to be a slow track comparatively because of whatever factors that may be. Right. And so there's all of this different variance about it, and like by the same token, right? Like we had all this reporting about Tetaroa McMillan's pro day last year, mostly from Dov Kleiman, who is not someone you should be getting reporting from in the first place, but, posting all these clips and like, okay, well, he posted this on his YouTube channel and he called it his pro day. So this is his pro day and yada, yada, yada. But it was outside. And then when the APT came out for Arizona's makeup pro day, because that was when the Big 12 was having an all-conference pro day that Tetaroa McMillan did not attend, but he had a makeup pro day at Arizona. And on the APT, it mentions all the workouts, including the 40, were done inside. And so that clip that went around about Tetaroa McMillan's pro day was not from his pro day. That's why there's no scouts that you can see in the video. Because it's just a training session. It's just a training session that his family showed up to. It's not his pro day. And so there's all of these different things, right? Where it's like you're missing so much context that you can really only get if you have data to this level of granularity. And like for that reason, right, like pro day times don't need to be adjusted. They are doing all of this adjusting. They're doing all of this accounting for surface type and wind and weather and all of these different things. You know, like all of this is mentioned. Like Jalen Milroe last year was noted as somebody that on his first 40 at Alabama's pro day, he was weaving severely. And so his second 40 time was much faster because he ran in a straight line. He ran 40 yards instead of 50. And so his time was faster. Like, things like that happen, and they are all noted very diligently and very like in a lot of detail on the APT report. And those things are important in terms of developing the context that we have in terms of the lens that we see these prospects through.
Yeah. So what do you think is like the value at the end of the day of having athletic testing at all? Like, we're both nerds. We love data, but like we can easily fall into the trap of assuming that having data is the same as understanding that that data is valuable. What have you found about the value of data?
So I think it can be hit or miss sometimes, right? Like, I think that we know that most NFL teams, at least in the modern era, place some value on athletic testing to some degree, right? Like Kentley Platt, who does RAS, and we can talk about RAS if you want, but
for sure, dude.
But he does a very good job at cataloging all of these prospects. And one thing that he points out almost every year is that there has not been a player drafted in the first round with a sub 5 RAS in like, I think it's 8 years now. Like, it's a long time. And so like, if you are not at least an above average athlete by RAS's metric, you are not going to be a first round player. And so sometimes that data is useful in being a little bit disqualifying, right? Like sometimes it's like, okay, like we have this data. He tested bad. Like, you know, like Lee Hunter, for example, the Texas Tech defensive tackle in this draft class, he went to the combine and tested poorly, where his RAS is like a 2. He's not going to go in the first round. It's a disqualifying process. And before that, he was in first round mock drafts. And so it's a little bit of a disqualifying process there. I think it's also valuable in the sense on the very, very, very other end of the draft in terms of undrafted free agency. There are so many times where NFL teams will sign a guy to an undrafted free agent contract purely because he jumped 40 inches or ran a 4.3 or, you know, tested out of the gym at his pro day. And having that data about who those guys are is really helpful in projecting like this guy is going to get signed to a UDFA contract versus this guy's going to be a minicamp invite versus this guy's going to go straight to the UFL or straight to Canada. That is important to have. And it doesn't seem that important to have because it's like such a like thin margin at the very end of the draft where it's like most people don't really care. But there's a lot of people that care about that because there's a lot of people that predict UDFA signings. There's a lot of people that say like, oh, well, you know, maybe this is a guy I had borderline UDFA, but like I might bump him up into the 7th round now, because we also know that NFL teams a lot of the time will use 7th round picks on players that they are planning on signing in UDFA that they are worried negotiations will not go their way.
Right. Yeah. It famously happened with Tommy Sweeney.
Right.
Who had agreed to terms during the 7th round of a UDFA contract. And was it the Panthers learned that the Saints were doing it, or was it the other way around?
It was the Panthers learned the Saints were doing it. And so they were planning on taking him. And so then the Saints traded back into the 7th round to draft him. They were out of picks. They were just doing UDFA calls, but they traded back into the 7th to draft Tommy Sweeney because they heard that the Panthers were going to either draft him or sign him. One of the two. This is also famously something that happened with Max Duggan, the TCU quarterback that the Chargers drafted in the 7th round a few years ago. He was another guy where like the Chargers were negotiating with him in undrafted free agency. They said, we're not going to win this bidding war. We have a 7th round pick left. We were going to use it on this other guy, but we think we can get that guy in undrafted free agency for less money, less guarantees. So we're just going to draft the quarterback. So it happens all the time. And so that data is valuable to have because if a guy jumped 40 inches and ran a 4.3 and did all these things at his pro day, and he's sort of a borderline draftable prospect, that guy's probably going to get drafted off of that because there's going to be a bidding war for his services in undrafted free agency. This is useful for projecting like guys that are going to stick around as undrafted free agents in terms of like guys who are going to make a 53-man roster, guys who are going to make a practice squad, maybe make a 53-man roster in year 2. Like that data is valuable for those sorts of things of like most of those guys generally are better athletes, unless it is a guy that like fell completely out of the draft because they were a very poor athlete. But before that, they were projected as, you know, an early to mid day 3 pick. And so on both ends of the spectrum, there is, you know, certain ways to make that data valuable. I think it's also valuable for a lot of team specific things because, like, again, using RAS as a facsimile here because we don't really have a better metric to use, right? Like teams have an internal formula and most teams have different ones, an internal formula to determine their own quantification of athleticism. And a lot of teams have thresholds that they will not draft the guy if he is not a good enough athlete at XYZ, right? And so like the Packers are the most famous example of this. Like the Packers thresholds are famously very stringent. They've been the same way for 20 years. And so, you know, you'll post a mock draft and Packers fans will be like, well, this guy doesn't fit the arm length requirement to play outside corner for Green Bay. And I'm like, it's a naming exercise. Like, please calm down. It's November. But those thresholds, those thresholds become important, right? When we get to April, because if a guy measures in or runs a certain way or, you know, jumps a certain way, then like that guy's not going to get drafted by the Packers. And we can sort of like historically, you can go back and you can look and you can sort of figure out what those thresholds are for yourself of like, okay, are we sort of like at or near the threshold? Are we way below it? Are we above it? Like, and figure out, you know, like, okay, this guy's going to be not on the Packers board. This is going to be a guy that they're not going to take. This is going to be a guy that they're maybe more interested in than consensus. And that helps you as an analyst if you were doing a 2, 3, 4, 7 round mock draft, right, as you get into the middle rounds. But it also helps doing the first round of mock drafts, right? Like there's a ton of things where it's like, if and when the Packers had a first round pick earlier this year, right? It's like, well, you know, like their corner room is pretty bad. Like maybe I'll take Clemson's Avion Terrell as a corner for them. Avion Terrell's arms aren't long enough to play outside corner for the Packers. He'd be a slot for them. So maybe that pick doesn't make as much sense as taking somebody that maybe is ranked lower than consensus, like a Colton Hood from Tennessee or a Chris Johnson from San Diego State or something like that. And maybe that guy makes more sense for the Packers to draft. And so it makes you a better mock drafter and like predictor of where talent is going to end up to have this data.
So to the point that you had made about like identifying UDFAs, right? Or guys who like, you know, didn't play football, right? So like we've got like a relatively high profile example as far as these things can be high profile of a couple of IPP players, specifically Uwar Bernard from Nigeria. I believe Joshua Weru from Kenya also got like a tiny bit of press as well. But like relatively speaking, you know, these guys got a lot of press. In actuality, they got virtually no press. But for a little brief moment on draft Twitter, people were talking about Uwar Bernard from Nigeria because of his pro day, which he's 6'4", 308 pounds, likely going to play defensive tackle, but he hasn't really played much football. So wherever you're going to put a 308-pound guy, maybe this guy, right? Ran a 4.63 40. Holy crap. 1.58 10-yard split, 39-inch vertical. Oh, my God. 10-10 broad. Oh, my God. And then average to below average agility. So 4.57 shuttle, kind of above average, and an 8.13 second 3-cone, which I regret to point out is the most important workout for a pass rusher. But still, whatever, right? Like this guy jumps through the roof, has an outstanding pro day, and ends up getting, you know, a couple of articles written about him, you know, some Yard Barker aggregation, some Dove Kleiman tweets, right? An RAS card that looks really pretty. That's the kind of guy that could go from, you know, non-priority free agent to priority free agent, or from even PFA all the way to a 7th round pick, right? Like, I mean, and we all Vikings fans who listen to this podcast remember Moritz Beringer, the wide receiver / tight end from Germany that was drafted in the 6th round, right before the Falcons were going to. So I guess they sniped someone who didn't end up working out. But like, it's this kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, 100%. And look, like, as many examples as we have of these athletic guys that maybe don't have as much football experience or like don't have the same level of tape as like supreme athletes at their position, guys that are going to be drafted in the first 2 rounds. Like, as many examples as we have of those guys not working out, NFL teams continue to make that bet. And so it's still important for us to identify those players, even if the statistics say that they are probably not going to pan out to be like a useful NFL player, because it is still useful in terms of like projecting where a player is going to go. And if you are a forecaster, which, is part of the consensus board ideology, right, is that there's forecasting consensus boards and predictive consensus boards, right? Like, if you are a forecasting analyst, it is important to have information about those sorts of players, because you are trying to be correct. Like, you're trying to be right. And so if you want to be right, you should have this data at your disposal. And so for a guy like Uar Bernard, it's like, yeah, he's never played football before. Will he be good? Statistically, probably not. I hope he is. I hope he's the best defensive tackle of all time. But statistically, that is unlikely. That is probably not going to be what happens with Uar Bernard. But an NFL team is still going to have the hubris to draft him anywhere on day 3 of the draft, probably this year. And we see this all the time, right? Like, NFL teams continue to do this, despite the fact that we have all of this additional ancillary data to suggest that NFL teams are not actually very good at developing talent in most cases.
Just like how, like, earlier, like, a couple years ago, we were like, man, Josh Allen's going to ruin quarterback drafting for everyone else because he worked out. And then Brock Purdy is ruining NFL drafting for quarterbacks now. Jordan Mailata might be ruining our ability to evaluate, but like, not everybody's Jeff Stoutland, right?
Right, exactly. And that's the thing, is that, like, there is a human element to this, right, that I think is an important part of being an analyst and being a forecaster and being predictive about how things like the NFL draft work, because the NFL draft is a very soft science. It is not like, if the NFL draft was a hard science and it operated on logic and reason every single year, somebody would be able to predict a full first-round mock draft. That is a thing that would be able to occur. But nobody has ever done that before. Nobody's ever really gotten close to doing that before, because the NFL draft is not a hard science. There is human decision-making involved, and human decision-making inherently includes certain biases towards certain players, hubris about whether or not you can be the ones to develop this guy, even if he's never played football before in his life, but you look at him and you're like, holy shit, look at him. He's 6'4", 308 pounds, and he ran a 4.63. Like, we have to be able to do something with that guy.
Certainly something.
Right, something. We specifically, us in this building, have to be able to do something with that guy. And, there's all these, you hear stories all the time about, like, owners getting involved in making draft picks, or like coaches come in and, it gets the 4th round and the running backs coach for a certain team is like, look, like, let me draft my guy, dude. I've been waiting 2.5 days for this. Right. Like, and the scouts are like, no, like, he's really not good. And he's like, I don't care. Get me my guy.
That is, like, my literal son. Come on.
Right. Exactly. Like, and so, like, there is a very, very human aspect of this that, like, the data can point you to, right? Like, the data can point you in the direction of predicting what human decisions teams are going to make, right? Of, like, Uar Bernard ran a 4.63 at 308 pounds, and, like, you saw all the pictures that circulated of him.
Yeah,
that guy's going to get drafted. He's never played football before in his life. And, like, maybe that's unfair to all these guys that have gone through 4 or 5 years of college football. And, one guy is missing out on an opportunity because Uar Bernard is getting drafted instead of him, right? Like, whatever guy was going to be Mr. Irrelevant before Uar Bernard was discovered in Nigeria. That guy probably wasn't going to make it either.
Yeah, but, like, it would have been nice.
Right. And, like, yeah, it would have been nice for that guy. That's cool and everything. But also, like, we know from studying what the NFL draft looks like in prior years that guy's going to get drafted. It doesn't matter if he's never played football or not, because we have this data that says, like, holy shit, look how fast he ran. Look how green that RAS card is. Someone's going to take a chance on that because of hubris.
Look how green that card. There's at least one NFL team's like, man, look how green that number is, dude.
Yeah, and it's Chris Ballard.
It is. Known RAS enjoyers, the Indianapolis Colts.
Yes.
Yeah. I was looking through the list of IPP athletes on current NFL rosters, and it is like it's like two people, but like one of them is a kicker. So like, what are we doing? But
Yes.
Jordan Mailata, right? Jakob Johnson, who is a fullback for not the Patriots, or is it also the Patriots? I don't know.
He was on the Patriots for a long time. I think he's on the Texans now.
Sure. So
which is like the Patriots.
Actually it is. Yeah. F.A. Obata, which is kind of all right. Sam Reyes, who's been off, like he's been on like 3-4 different rosters, hasn't done anything. Thomas Odukoya, who I don't know who that is. David Bada, don't know who that is. Charlie Smith, Ireland kicker, right? TJ Maguranyanga. Oh, I nailed that. Mapolo Maz Mwansa, CJ Okoye, but not Christian Okoye, different Okoye, and Hagai Ndubuisi. I didn't know how to pronounce that one, so I went fast, and I think that actually was the correct decision. Yes, that's one guy and a kicker, right? Like,
yeah.
But yeah, there is one IPP player that has caught your attention a little bit. Because he's a specialist, but also because you're basically Japanese, right? So
I am Japanese. That is a factual statement that I am. I'm not. But yes, for the purposes of the podcast, and you know, so that people understand completely, I'm half Japanese.
Yeah, the first time a guest has ever contextualized something in my favor for something I've said. But yeah, so we've got this IPP kicker who I think he attended Hawaii, right? Like he's not.
Yes.
He's not just like from. There are other players that are like from Japan that we can talk about in a second. But Kanzei Matsuzawa? No, I said that wrong.
No, that was pretty good.
Yeah,
that was pretty good.
He's a kicker. Is he any good?
Yes. I have a vote for the Lou Groza Award, which is for the best college kicker.
Hilarious,
in the country.
but also you're probably more qualified than most voters.
So funny story about that. I actually didn't know that I had a vote until they sent me the SurveyMonkey link to fill out the ballot this year. Because they didn't tell me. I didn't apply for a vote. They just sent me an email in November and they were like, vote for the Groza Award. And
so they just like read your Justin Tucker piece and were like, you know what?
Well, so what I had to look at, I spent like an entire day looking into this because I was like, is the Groza Award one of the ones that's like partnered with the FWAA, which I'm a member of? And so like I get a preliminary vote, but I don't get a finalist vote like I do for the FWAA All-American team. Like, how did I get a vote for this? And it's not affiliated with the FWAA. It's not affiliated with anything other than the Lou Groza Foundation that gives out the award. And so actually, I legitimately think what happened is that they saw my tweets complaining about how their voters were bad, and they were like, fine, here. And now I have a vote for the award. But
no chance did you give it to Matsuzawa?
I did. Because
he's that good.
Kansei Matsuzawa only missed one field goal the entire season at Hawaii.
How many kickers is that true for?
Very few. The winner of the Groza Award was Tate Sandell at Oklahoma, who I think missed 3 kicks on the year, if I remember correctly. It was either 2 or 3, but it was multiple. Matsuzawa actually broke, I believe it's Jason Elam's record at Hawaii.
Oh my God.
Some like longtime NFL kicker that played at Hawaii. I think it's Jason Elam. But he broke his record for consecutive made field goals at Hawaii this season. He is legitimately pretty good. There was also a discussion in terms of like scouting kickers, which is that generally speaking, like when you were scouting a kicker for the NFL setting, you want a guy to be hitting kicks from 50 plus yards very frequently and like with regularity and in elements and things like that. Matsuzawa was playing in Hawaii. You know, it's low elevation, it's outside, the weather is nice most of the time. So like there's not that element of it so much for him. I'd also, if I remember correctly, he didn't kick very much outside of 50 yards, but like he is a guy who probably would get a small UDFA contract if he was American. But because he is Japanese and he's eligible for the IPP, he will probably be on a roster next season
because of the roster exemption.
Right, because he has the exemption to be on the list. And a lot of
Can you explain that exemption real quick? Because it's not just IPP players who get it.
Right, yeah. So the NFL expanded it either last year or 2 seasons ago so that every team in the NFL, it used to just be certain divisions. They would rotate divisions and they'd say like, hey, like the AFC West and the NFC West has the international exemption this year. But they expanded it a couple years ago to now all 32 teams have an international player exemption that they can designate at the beginning of training camp, where they essentially can have a 91st player on the roster. So the training camp roster is 90 players. If you designate a player as your international player, you can have 91 players because the international player does not count. That can be a player from the IPP program. So like the Commanders player last year was TJ Mangaruranga.
Nailed it.
And, like the Ravens player was CJ Okoye, who came up through the IPP program. But sometimes you can also just designate whoever you want. Like the Ravens previously have used the international exemption on David Ajabo, who is from Nigeria.
That's a second round pick from Michigan.
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
The Bears used their international player exemption for all of training camp last season on their punter, Torrey Taylor, who's from Australia.
Okay, we have to have a discussion about that, right? Like we can't count Australian punters specifically. Like if you're a wide receiver, fine.
Right.
If you're an Australian punter specifically, no way should you count for that roster exemption.
Correct. Yeah, but he does. And so that's what the Bears used it for. And so like there's a bunch of these players, and like there's a couple of guys coming out this year that also qualify for this, that played a bunch of college football but qualify for international exemption status. There's a bunch of guys previously, like you mentioned Thomas Odukoya as an IPP player. He played 4 years of college football at Eastern Michigan. Like he was a guy that Devin Jackson, who works for us, scouted at Eastern Michigan, and was signed as UDFA and got an international player exemption with the Titans because he is from England. Sadie Traore,
in this year's draft, Traore. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Sadie Traore, the tight end from Mississippi State, went through NFL Academy, which is the junior version of the IPP program. So essentially the way that the IPP program works is they identify all of these players in other sports around the world or people that are associated with American football federations in other countries around the world. And they identify whether or not they think that they have translatable traits to play in the NFL someday. If they are under 20, they can go to NFL Academy, which is in London, and basically do a prep year and then be eligible to play college football, or go straight from NFL Academy to the IPP program once they age into IPP age, which is over 20 years old. And so I know this because Uar Bernard, who we were talking about earlier, was a guy that they identified right sort of on the cutoff between NFL Academy and IPP. So they actually discovered him right after his 20th birthday. He wasn't eligible to go to NFL Academy. And so they said like, hey, hang tight, like just hang out and work out for a year. And then you're going to be in the IPP class this year. Yeah. And so now he's in the IPP class. So if you played like, playing college football in the U.S. does not disqualify you from counting for an international player exemption in the NFL. There are plenty of players that played a ton of college football that are international player exemptions now. There is a edge rusher at Idaho who started his career at Washington, who committed out of Germany, who a bunch of teams went to Idaho's pro day just to like ask him like, hey, like, are you a German citizen? Like, are you this, that, whatever, to see if he would qualify for the international player exemption, because like he tested pretty well. He's like 6'5", 240. He's like fine. And so there's all of this calculus in terms of like, well, who counts for an international player exemption? It could be anybody. And so, as long as you're not from the US or if you're David Ajabo, who is from the U.S., sort of.
He's got a Nigerian passport, right? Like that's
right,
the deal.
Exactly. Yeah. Like that's the sort of thing. And so you can use this exemption for whoever you want. And a lot of teams have historically used this international player exemption to roster an extra specialist, whether that's a kicker or a punter, most often a kicker. So Charlie Smith, the Saints kicker, who is now the main Saints kicker, as far as I'm aware, was a guy that the Saints used their international player exemption on, and essentially said, like, we're going to sort of have a kicking competition, but not really. And like, if the other guy sucks, then we can keep another kicker on our roster for free. The Falcons did this with Lenny Krieg, who's from Germany, who ended up being worse than Younghoe Koo, but same idea. The Giants did this with Jude McAtamney, who played college football at Rutgers, who played a couple of games for the Giants when Graham Gano got hurt this year before the Giants decided to spin the wheel on some free agents. And so a lot of teams will use the IPP as a way to, or use the international player exemption. I'm sorry, I shouldn't conflate the two terms.
Yeah.
But use the international player exemption as a way to roster an extra kicker or punter. And there's actually a guy in Ireland who basically does Pro Kick Ireland now. And he runs the specialist showcase at the Combine as well. And so they always have a bunch of the IPP eligible or international player exemption eligible kickers and punters at the specialist showcase at the Combine now, because this guy runs it. His name is Tad Leader. He's from Ireland. I don't actually know if that's how you say his first name, because it's Tadgh. So
there's like a specific Irish pronunciation for this. Like,
yeah. So I'm sorry for mispronouncing his name, but he's the guy. And he basically runs Pro Kick Ireland now. Like I'm using Pro Kick Ireland as the term because people know what Pro Kick is, I think. But essentially, like, he identifies all these guys in like Gaelic football and rugby and all these other different sports. And he says like, hey, I think you could probably kick in the NFL. And he puts them through a year training camp and then sends them off to the program. That's where Charlie Smith came from. He's from Northern Ireland. And so a lot of teams do want to use that exemption on extra specialists. And so for that reason, Kansai Matsuzawa will probably be on an NFL team next year.
That's so cool. So let's take a look at some of the specialists that are ranked by the consensus board. So consensus board, very good at ranking a lot of things, not at specialists, because it relies on general draft analysts who will throw specialists in at the end and will sometimes take a look at a hang time for a punter or just the overall kicking percentage without taking a look at whether or not they kicked anything beyond 50 yards, or if they were invited to the Senior Bowl or Shrine Bowl, and then just kind of pencil them in without looking at them. So I want your takes on the top-rated punters, which I think you like the top punter, Brett Thorson from Georgia.
I do like Brett Thorson from Georgia. I think that he is far and away the best punter in the draft. He is very high hang time guy, very low return percentage guy, has been a very constant starter for Georgia, has punted in some very, very big moments, obviously playing for Georgia. And so you don't really have any questions about the mental side of things, which is a big thing for specialists always, of course. But yeah, I like him a lot. I think he should get drafted.
Wow. Number 1 PFF grade last year, number 4, Teamworks grade this year. Wildly different hang times the 2 years. I find that interesting. I'm sure there's a reason for that. Number 2, Ryan Eckley from Michigan State.
I do not like Ryan Eckley as much.
Okay.
To my recollection, he is not a very good hang time punter, but he was at the Senior Bowl. And so, as you mentioned, sometimes people just sort of look at the 2 Senior Bowl punters and they're like, those are the 2 best punters.
Yeah, 4.07 second hang time. Last year.
Not very good.
That's not good at all. Very high return percentage too. 52%. For
reference, for the audience that doesn't know what the threshold for hang time is, generally the worst punter in the NFL has around an average of 4.2 hang time.
Yeah, it's the reason that punt god / alleged criminal. Right. Matt Ariza wasn't drafted, is because he would just punt it down a line drive, and then he had this quote go around with I don't care, I just want to boot it as far as possible. And a bunch of people were like, "Yay!" And a bunch of people who like punting were like, "Are you psychotic?"
Yeah.
And he won the Ray Guy, I think, or something like that.
Yes.
Yeah, 4.07, very bad.
By the way, Matt Ariza did get drafted.
Oh yeah, but then he got cut after the allegations.
He got drafted, and then he lost a punting competition to Matt Hawk because Matt Ariza also didn't know how to hold.
That was also it. Yeah. Speaking of not knowing how to hold, Jack Stonehouse, number 3.
Jack Stonehouse actually very much knows how to hold. That's
same thing.
sort of his whole thing.
The Stonehouses have been over this. Yeah.
Right. Jack Stonehouse is from a punting dynasty. His brother, his dad, and his uncle have all punted in the NFL before. And so, like, legitimately, he is from not brother. Ryan is his cousin. So his dad, his uncle, and his cousin, his dad's brother's son, all have punted in the NFL. They're a very big punting family. There was a story that he told me at the Shrine Bowl about how in his family it's a rite of passage to hit yourself in the face with your knee and make your nose bleed because it means your leg is flexible enough to like punt effectively.
That's right.
And so I had a very fun conversation with him asking about like when the first time that he did that was, and I think he said he was like 11.
And everyone celebrated.
Right, and everyone's celebrating. It's like a big, huge thing in their family, and they're like, all right, yeah, you're ready to go. And so I do like Jack Stonehouse. I think that he's sort of like borderline draftable. I'd probably have him as the second punter in the draft.
All right, kickers. Drew Stevens from Iowa is number 1.
Yeah, Stevens is good. He is... Again, like he was at the Senior Bowl, and so people tend to just sort of like look at that and they're like, all right, yeah, for sure. He also was one that at his pro day at Iowa was like, I have all these meetings with teams. And so I think people were sort of like, well, he must be the best kicker because he actually has meetings set up. But he's, to my recollection, he's like fine. I don't really think there's like a, like for sure, like surefire draftable kicker in this year's class, so he is probably going to be fine.
So the 2 and 3 kickers were also, I believe, the most efficient 50-yard kickers this year and last year. So Trey Smack from Florida, number 2, and Dominic Zavada from Michigan, number 3, who was the number 1 most efficient 50-yard kicker in 2024.
Yeah, so I like Zavada a lot. There was a little bit of issue. He had a little bit of issue this year, which I think was probably mostly derived from holding because his punter transferred to Florida to play with Trey Smack, who then got better this season. And so I would wager that is probably one where it's like, oh, well, I think maybe the holder is good.
Who's the holder?
But yeah, I do like both of those guys. They are both fine. Wait,
is it Tommy Doman? Is that the holder?
Yes. Tommy Doman, the Florida punter. He was at Michigan in 2024 with Dominic Zavada.
Oh, he's like the number 4 punter on the board. I almost talked about him.
Yeah. He's pretty good. He was at the Shrine Bowl. He's perfectly fine. I think he'll get a UDFA deal, probably have a chance to win a competition. For one of those teams that sort of signed like a mid-tier punter, even like the Vikings potentially, who signed Johnny Hecker, who's getting a little bit older.
Quite a bit
Tommy
older.
Doman. Yeah, Tommy Doman could be one where you sign him as a sort of like quasi competition, and like maybe he beats him out and maybe he doesn't.
Cool. And then also we have long snapper rankings for some reason. So Bo Gardner, Luke Basso, and Tyler Zazansky were all very closely grouped together on the consensus board from ranks 433 to 475 are the 1, 2, and 3 long snappers.
I think that's correct.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. I mean, having all of them sort of in that group together, I think is correct also. But yeah, I would say that that's roughly correct. Zazansky was at the Shrine Bowl. I believe the other 2 were at the Senior Bowl. Basso is pretty good. He will certainly be, I mean, all 3 of them will certainly be undrafted free agents because they're long snappers. But Basso, I know, has gotten some interest from a few teams because that's sort of my neck of the woods. And then Zazansky and Gardner are both like pretty good. I mean, long snapping is not less exact science. It's actually a more exact science, which makes it harder to evaluate sometimes because like most of them are pretty good at it. And so like it's hard. It's much harder when you're watching special teams film to determine if a long snapper is good or bad, because like most of the time, like the obviously bad things that a long snapper could do are not happening very often, in terms of like, he's not completely missing the holder most of the time. He's not like rolling the snap back to guys most of the time. Like And so it's a much more precise sort of like, you kind of have to zoom in and do like Zapruder films of every rep to be like, where are the laces on the ball now that I've zoomed
like,
this in, it's 240p.
Is it like 6.5 rotations? Is he always, setting up the ball correctly so that it lands correctly because he's got the same number of rotations? Is the timing appropriate? It's, and like the film quality that we have is not wonderful for this stupidly precise kind of scouting.
Right. I will also say too that like the good thing about all three of those guys is that like one of the most important traits for a long snapper in the NFL is size. So the punt rules specifically are much different in NCAA than they are in the NFL. In the NCAA, the long snapper is allowed to release off the line of scrimmage as soon as the ball is snapped. In the NFL, they are not allowed to release until the ball is kicked. Mm-hmm. And so size is much more important in the NFL than it is in college, because in college, you almost want a guy to be a little bit smaller so that he can just like get down the field real quick. But in the NFL, it's much more important that he is able to like deconstruct a block and or like hold a block so that like an actual player can make a tackle. Mm-hmm. And so generally you were looking for the same sort of size that like a linebacker would have. And so the nice thing about all three of those guys is that they're listed like 6'2", 6'3" or taller and like 220 pounds plus. So all three of them clear that threshold also.
This has been so phenomenal. I was going to talk more about Japanese football players. There is another IPP Japanese player, or not IPP, just
Japanese football player.
Japanese player. Yeah. But we're hitting an hour, and I think James will be mad. So we're going to have more Japanese football content on Wide Left. I can guarantee that. Which is hilarious, but also very on brand.
That is a very funny thing that we can guarantee.
Yeah.
Don't worry, guys. I know you were worried that there wasn't going to be any Japanese football content on Wide Left, but we can guarantee that it's coming.
Yeah.
We will have it.
Look, we signed a basically Japanese guy for this reason. So Alex Katson, where can people find you? What do you do? Go through the list again.
Yeah, the easiest way, honestly, is probably just to go to alexkatson.com. It's spelled the same way that my name is. That has links to everything that I do. It's probably the easiest way to do it. But if you're looking for something in particular, you can go to footballsheets.substack.com, which is the company that runs all of the spreadsheets, which is what we talked about for the bulk of this episode. I also cover the Chargers for Chargers Wire, as well as host a Chargers Centric Draft Show on the Guilty as Charged podcast. I cover the Washington Huskies for Huskies Wire. I'm the COO at Wide Left, a Reefs media company at wideleft.football. And I am generally around on Twitter and on whatever else, Blue Sky and wherever else that you need to find content.
Yeah. Just look for the Vaporwave profile picture.
Yeah, on Twitter, I'm at Alex Katson. On Blue Sky, it's just at Katson. So either place you want to go there. But if you were just looking for like, if that is too long of a list and you're like, what the fuck, I don't know what I'm doing, just go to alexkatson.com. That has links to everything that you need to see.
All right, dope. Thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right, let's go to the mailbag. And the first question is from Eric the Red, who asks, is a general manager really necessary? Would it be so bad if we just didn't hire one?
That feels like a very Cincinnati Bengals type situation. No, you probably will want one soon. Like I understand it's not gonna happen before the draft, but okay, I just got a text saying check the group chat. So I'm gonna do that now live on the podcast. First of all, I gotta figure out which group chat. Let's find out.
There's so many. You got the polycule.
I don't know.
You have the other polycule you're trying to like bring down from the inside.
Well, that part does happen a lot. Let's see. Oh, interesting. I wish I could explain what it was. It's unfortunate. God, there's so much happening here.
norsecode.threadless.com.
Look, I will link it when it is appropriate. That is going to be a thing. Okay. Okay. whatever. James, you can cut this if you want because I didn't actually end up revealing anything interesting.
Nope.
I have to text this person saying I am in a podcast now.
Like I am in a constant state of podcast. And as a result, I am unable to tell anyone anything, including the people listening to the show.
Yeah, which is unfortunate because that is generally the idea behind a podcast.
I mean, is that what you do when you're live streaming with Luke?
Well, that's not a podcast, so I wouldn't know why that would be.
You know, it's funny you mentioned that. I went to one of my podcast aggregators the other day,
right.
And I was able to find that. And it listed it as a podcast after dark, and I have.
Well, you know how like when Dove Kleiman quotes like,
Albert
Breer or Match Night, right? Yeah, but I'm just saying, like, an aggregator will aggregate things and kind of mischaracterize or put onto a different platform from what the original source had intended. So just because Dove Kleiman tweets out something Albert Breer said on television doesn't mean that Albert Breer tweeted it out. You know what I mean? So just because you see it on a podcast doesn't mean that it's a podcast.
What was the name of the aggregator that I blocked a long time ago? Was it Dove Kleiman that declared he was the least racist human being because he had a collection of like Martin Luther King stuff?
Yeah, that wasn't Dove Kleiman. That was the business reporter Darren Ravel.
That's who it was. It was Ravel.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, getting back to the question, is a general manager really necessary?
Yeah, I mean, so you're going to want one soon. I would argue before the NFL draft, but it sounds like it's going to have to happen after. But yeah, I think you do. I think you need someone who makes decisions and then consequently is accountable for those decisions, has a process that you can point to, and then executes on that process. I would say kind of the general word cloud approach to general managing. You know how rice cookers use fuzzy logic to determine that your rice is cooked? That feels like the best way to describe how this draft is going to go.
And if you have any questions about how to use it, you just use the finger test. It's fine.
Yeah.
Let's go to Raul, who asks, there does not seem to be a good fit between need and value in the first round. Is there a player in the top 10 of this draft that you would stick and pick if a fall occurs?
I mean, there's like a couple, right? So I think the most obvious is Caleb Downs, who is considered like a top 5 prospect in the draft. Now he's a safety, so he could drop a little bit. Sometimes that doesn't happen with safeties. We saw that with Derwin James, who didn't fall as far as people thought he might. I wouldn't do it for Jeremiah Love. I would do it for Arvell Reese. I would do it for Fernando Mendoza. I would do it maybe for Sonny Styles. I wouldn't be upset about it, I guess, if it was Sonny Styles. Caleb Downs, obviously. I don't know how much I would do that, despite, Arvell Reese being nominally an edge. I don't know how much I would do that for the other edges that are being considered there, like Reuben Bain, David Bailey. I would do it for Carnell Tate. Do we think Francis Maui Noah knows how to snap the ball? Probably not. So probably not him. Monsoor Delane, I would do it for. Probably not Jordan Tice or Mekhi Lemon. That's one where I would want to trade down and get good value if one of those two fell. Vega Iwane, can he snap? I don't know. And then after that, that's just in the pick range. So there's a couple, but a lot of them I think are more valuable as, trade bait, right? Like if David Bailey falls to 18, like obviously the Vikings would benefit from having David Bailey on their team, but I think they would benefit more from trading. But if Fernando Mendoza falls somehow, I mean, like Tom, like I don't know if it was Tom Brady, but basically people in the Raiders are like, we're looking forward to having Fernando Mendoza, right? Like everyone's there, right?
Kirk Cousins even said that, yeah.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah, Kirk Cousins was like, I'm looking forward to like coaching the younger clone of myself who is more successful in the Big Ten than I was. Great, fantastic. But yeah, so like that's not gonna happen. But like obviously in kind of like a gas mask type situation, were it to happen, like yeah, absolutely draft them. Yeah, Caleb Downs is the obvious answer. But yeah, Sonny Styles, Orville Reese, Carnell Tate. Yeah.
All right, next question is going to be from Big Algernon, who asks, forget who, but someone said recently that they like to look at whether a prospect actually graduated from college because it shows intelligence. Is that really a thing? And is that good, especially for defensive secondary guys?
All right. So despite the fact that me not graduating from college would suggest that what I'm about to say is not true, there are a number of intelligent people who don't graduate from college, and it's actually a very poor marker of intelligence. Now, it is correlated with intelligence because income is correlated with intelligence, because intelligence is correlated with the ability to kind of produce. There's a whole thing about this, but like the ability to provide the environment that will make you good at the type of tests that we nominally call intelligence, whatever, right? But like, all of this is to say that, you know, intelligence is not a very well-defined measure. It's often very bad. It doesn't measure what people think it measures. And then also on top of that, the type of intelligence that graduating would suggest, or that college classes would suggest, is not the type of intelligence you would need on a football field. So like a lot of intelligence researchers have rejected the notion of, it's called G for generalized intelligence, have rejected the notion of a generalized intelligence, because intelligence is this like, you know, multifaceted million factor thing. And we can only measure some elements of it. And people have been suggesting for decades that if we can measure some elements of it, that gives us generally the overall shape of someone's intelligence, which we now know is generally just like not true. And there's no reason to think that that assumption was true in the first place. But also on top of that, graduating college like doesn't even tell you that someone is intelligent in the kind of way that college classes would test. Like it's all broken at every element of that chain. And then we have just the football specific evidence, which is that college players who don't graduate from college when they declare from the draft almost always, I shouldn't say almost always, do monumentally better than the college graduates do. And we know that because if you're good at football, you declare early. Like that happens. And a lot of players might go back to college and get their degree. I think that's always a fun story. But we get a lot of third-year players coming out that have not graduated college, that were on a 5-year track to graduate college. And those are the best players in the draft. The reason a lot of people wait until they graduate college to enter the draft is because they weren't good enough to enter the draft earlier. So it is the opposite. And younger players do well. Third-year players do better than fourth-year players, do better than fifth-year players. I assume do better than sixth and seventh-year players, a thing that we've had to deal with for a little bit now. Yeah, if you declare early, that's because you're better at football than someone who can't declare early. That's what that means. So all of the theoretical underpinning of the nature of this supposition is already broken at every level of the chain. But on top of that, the evidence that we have directly measuring this is incorrect. And I think the closest I've personally seen of this is like Bill Parcells' rules for drafting a quarterback include like, did they graduate college? And I'm going to Google this real quick. Bill Parcells hasn't coached in at least 20 years, right? Like it's been a bit. Yeah. Yeah, actually almost exactly 20 years this year. So yeah, things have changed, I would venture to say. And we have a ton of evidence saying that Bill Parcells' rules for recognizing quarterbacks are all basically broken now. The completion percentage rule doesn't seem to work, and that one is the closest to being a good one. The number of starts rule doesn't work at all. The graduation rule doesn't work at all. It's not good.
So by proxy then, or as I say, by proxy, if we were looking at like the NBA, for example, where it's one and done for damn near everybody, like just nothing but idiots.
Right.
Idiots
yeah.
All the way down.
Yeah. If we were to accept some of the premises of this question, yeah, it would be nothing but idiots. And that's a good thing because you don't want to draft, what are we calling him? Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
No. we don't need we don't need extra attention.
Yeah.
Chandler asks, are the Vikings trying to have their cake and eat it too by bringing in Kyler? He's probably overqualified to be a backup, and should McCarthy begin the year poorly again, will heighten the pressure to change quarterbacks more than a Mariota-level backup would.
Yes.
If Kyler starts for most of the year, that's taking away a whole year from McCarthy's development and taking McCarthy down to the last year of his rookie contract. And they'd have to decide on re-signing Kyler back. This feels like trying to not move on from McCarthy while also kind of moving on. And it feels like you can't do both. At least not without signaling that you don't believe in McCarthy anymore.
I kind of reject the premise of this question too.
Just a little bit.
Yeah, it's weird that the question is constructed with a background assumption that it is possible that McCarthy could start. Which obviously it is technically possible, right? Murray could get injured, Murray could get arrested or whatever, right? Like, who knows?
Could go Puka Nacua.
Could go full Puka Nacua, right?
You never want to go full Puka.
I mean, they're both streamers, right? So you could go full streamer mode, say the streamer words, and then you're not starting suddenly, right? So it's possible, right? But it is not if Murray is healthy and doesn't suffer like a Deshaun Watson like drop off. I'm not even talking about the off field, just Deshaun Watson's not good at football anymore, right? Like if Murray has like a 0% completion rate in camp, yeah, he's not going to start. Fine, but like we're talking about 0.0001% outcomes, right? 95% of outcomes, Kyler is starting the year. So the weird premise of this question is that you're trying to create this kind of tension between Kyler being a backup and McCarthy, and that doesn't really work. So it is just the second thing. Kyler they're planning on starting him for all of the year, most of the year maybe. He has had some injuries, so it is possible that McCarthy or Carson Wentz, I don't know, plays.
Yeah.
But like, are they in a spot where they're trying to not move on from McCarthy while moving on? Yes, but I don't think it like fits the premise or fits the overall spirit of the have your cake and eat it too. Because like you do just need to do that. Like the Colts were basically doing that with Anthony Richardson, and he's persona non grata in the organization for a number of reasons that have to do not just with his overall level of talent, but their perception of his work ethic and stuff like that. Which might be an accurate perception. I'm just trying to be careful of my language. But I would say that they're maximizing their odds of a good outcome, because if McCarthy actually improves in the ways they need him to improve while practicing, they can move on from Kyler. And we're going to go through this whole, in the entire offseason, we're going to be like, I can't believe that they're not getting a starting quarterback. They need to move on. We saw what we had with McCarthy last year, and then they'll prove us wrong, and it'll be fun. And we all get to like eat crow, except for Thor, who's going to have like the greatest day of his life. Which like deserve it, I would think, right? If McCarthy
a giant mission accomplished banner that he's had
right.
that's been collecting dust that's is going to unfurl behind him, and he's just going to start sneezing and coughing because of all the dust.
Yeah. Which again, well deserved, I think. If McCarthy pulls in an All-Pro season in 2027, like fine, you get that one. But but like, you know. That is fine because you're throwing as many darts as you can at the board, right? And all you need is like one bullseye. Or I guess if you're... That's not how darts work. James knows this well, so I'm sorry for hurting you. But but you know what I mean, right? Ignore the actual rules of most ways that you play darts for a moment here and just throw as many darts as you can at the board. Because you only need one to hit in this imaginary construction of the game.
This is the worst I can.
It's not. I know it's not a darts analogy. Okay.
It stopped. Yeah, this is great. I love it.
180. No. I think that this is fine. I think that you need to have a couple of shots to figure out what your 2027 quarterback situation is going to look like. And having a guy continuing to develop is fine. You can develop players multiple ways. They don't just have to start in football games for that development to occur. And I actually think McCarthy should not start for the purposes of better developing him, because I don't think, because one of the problems with quarterback development or any player development is that when they start playing in games, they start reverting to habits that they have, if they've not locked in the new habits that they need to lock in, they start reverting to their old habits, and then it becomes even harder to break. So you want him to lock in the mechanical changes they're making, to lock in the process changes they're making, so that he doesn't immediately kind of revert when he starts playing games again. And it's really difficult to enforce that when he breaks the patterns you're trying to instill in actual games. So I don't think that they're trying to, have their cake and eat it too. I think that they're actually, engaging in a multi-pronged strategy for what 2027 is going to look like. Now that makes it sound sophisticated. It's not. It might be a bad strategy, but I don't think it's bad for the reason that's identified in this question.
Next question is from Skimbleshanks the Railway Cat, who asks, how concerning is it that Ben Solak called the Murray signing, quote, the best signing of any team this cycle, end quote. Also,
it's pretty concerning.
But also for Arif's appropriate reporting corner, how many different ethnicities have you hugged?
All right.
And which one was the most intimate?
Okay. The answer to the Solak question is very concerning. The answer to the different ethnicities I've hugged, uncountable millions. The most intimate, probably like a 7-way tie.
We're not going to list them. We're just going to say that it was a 7-way tie.
We're just going to say it was a 7-way tie and move on.
Room Temp asks, for Arif's not gambling advice corner, what 1-year deal type of players are worth the vet minimum contract with hopes it was the team and not them being washed? Like the anti-Russell Wilson, basically.
I think Kyler Murray's actually a really good example of this. But like, who's left in free agency that might sign for vet? Well, anybody who's left in free agency might sign for vet minimum. But probably not Debo. I think he's probably washed. Stephon Diggs would be funny. I wouldn't say he's washed. Taylor Decker's kind of washed. You don't need him, though. Marshawn Lattimore would be funny for completely different reasons. Actually, get both Diggs and Lattimore. That sounds fun. L'Jarius Sneed. I don't think he's washed. He was merely a Titan. Happens to the best of us. So probably L'Jarius Sneed might sign for minimum. Jonnu Smith would be funny for completely unrelated reasons, like not even bit reasons. He's just a funny player. Going down this list, I'm not seeing a ton of opportunities here. Oh, Ryan Kelly's a free agent. Probably contact him, see what that looks like.
Look at Valius Jones.
Yeah.
Bring me Valius
Jones. And then also there's like Tyreek Hill, who he's probably adding value.
Just a bit. Also from Room Temp, what combination of assault and bigotry will Puka commit next? Will he reach Ty Cobb levels?
Okay, so I was like, hey, I know like 5 things about baseball, and one of them is one of them is that Ty Cobb is racist, which was really upsetting when I found out that fact was actually wrong, which means like at least 20, probably more, % of my baseball knowledge is incorrect. But it sounds like he's not actually racist. And I went through like a couple of articles, some actually very poorly written, unfortunately. James knows. And yeah, I guess it's a complete myth that he's racist. Like it all largely, I shouldn't say all, it largely stems from this one ghost-written biography by a guy named Al Stump, who was so bad at journalism that a bunch of different outlets had already blackballed him for making stuff up, including like TV Guide, which was my understanding, a more serious journalistic outlet that we would consider in 2026. But still, that feels like a lot. And Ty Cobb was like about to sue him for just making up all kinds of stuff. And then he died actually before he could get to the lawsuit part of that. But yeah, it sounds like he was pro-integration. It wasn't even just not racist. He was like pro-baseball integration. in several ways, and often complimented some of the trailblazing black players in baseball. So surprisingly, despite being the best example that we generally tend to have, like, because the stories about Ty Cobb are crazy, right? It's like, yeah, he stabbed a black guy because of racism reasons. You're like, oh my God, he did that? That's wow. Who would make that up? Al Stump. Someone went in and looked at all, because he got into a ton of fights. And so, like, if you hear he got into a fight with a black groundskeeper, he got into a fight with a black bellhop or whatever, and you're like, oh my God, he's fighting all of these people of a different race. He must be racist. No, it turns out he just fought a ton of people, and actually a disproportionately small number of them were not white. And a number of the people that he fought that people claimed weren't white, turns out were white. So he just fights people, which I do respect more, right? Like, that's okay. I get it. It sounds like no one loved hanging out with him, but not for racism reasons. Just like, yeah, he'll fight you reasons, which makes sense. Lucas seems like an awful hang too, but that's the only comparison I can make.
people aren't as like negative about him, but it's the tide is turning.
Well, he might bite you. There's like that, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, the tide is turning. He did check himself into rehab. Multiple sources have indicated. I actually don't know how public this is, but I'm pretty confident it was a public report.
It was tweeted.
Well, no, not the rehab stuff. I know that was tweeted. Yeah. The next thing I'm about to say, which is that I think Jordan Rodriguez reported this, which is that he had checked himself into rehab before anyone could tell him that he should. Like, so the Rams weren't the ones to be like, you have to check yourself into rehab. He just like did it voluntarily. So I guess there is that. I know a number of people who have gone into rehab for various things. I can promise you that does not automatically make you a good person. But that is better than it isn't, right? So I'll give him that.
Was there an actual like addiction involved here, or is he just?
I don't know. I don't know what the rehab is for. Like,
that was the thing that surprised me. It was like he's checked himself into rehab. It's like, oh, great. Can you go to rehab for racism? I didn't, or like. Being an idiot? Is it just like I'm too online?
Isn't it just called school? Like, I don't like that's just school.
No, we already talked about graduating doesn't make you a better person. It just means you accomplished a goal.
I didn't say graduate. You don't have to graduate. Look, there's a ton of evidence that like education helps people. Okay, that's all I'm saying. But what combination will Puka commit next? I feel like he's going to be on the same kind of track for a little bit. The same kind of Aiden Ross touchdown celebration track that he's been on. I think that's going to be the thread of bigotry he's going to keep pursuing for a little while. It sounds like the assaults are not related to that currently. We'll see if these two Puka storylines dovetail and converge. I don't know.
Who is more of a persona non grata, him or Stephon Diggs? Once this whole thing kind of finishes up,
I have not kept up with the Stephon Diggs off-field stuff. So my last impression was that it wasn't as bad as it sounds, but that was like months ago. So I don't know. Maybe, yeah. Right now, it feels like Stephon Diggs is much better positioned than Puka is.
Yeah, it's not great. Annie Taylor-Joy asks, for Arif's athletic threshold and unintended consequences corner.
All right.
Since you caused the Vikings to draft Treadwell, will you be contacting the owner of the cursed poster? No, this was a framed shadow box.
Right.
With a terrible picture of Roger Goodell in it, to add your photograph or your autograph to it. Additionally, how did this move help your Seahawks?
I don't know how that would have helped the Seahawks in any way, but the story is that the Vikings changed their athletic thresholds because I had been reporting on the athletic thresholds that they had been using in the NFL draft, and I had apparently been reporting them more accurately than even I thought. And I thought I was pretty close to nailing it. And after 2015, they changed those thresholds, which, if you recall, is a tremendously odd draft to change your thresholds for, right? Because that was an outstanding draft. And then 2016, 2017, you go like Trey Waynes and Laquan Treadwell, and it's like, okay, what are we doing here? But yeah, I wouldn't say that that's the reason they drafted Laquan Treadwell. In fact, they did their own kind of computer vision sort of assisted before we had AI vision tracking. They did their own version of it to track Laquan Treadwell and argued essentially that he was faster than his 40 time. And so they imputed their own 40 time for Laquan Treadwell, and he passed whatever their new athletic thresholds were. So it sounded like they were going to draft him no matter what, if he was available, which he was obviously. So that's not, and also if they change because I did some reporting, that's on them. That's not on me. That's not my fault that they were like, hey, we got the system that works, but somebody with a blog might have figured it out. So we got to change it. No, that's clearly just bad decision making on their part.
Yeah, mistakes were made. Anton asks, what Hell League scoring rule should be brought into the actual league, and which rule will be the most fun? I mean, the kicking stuff is the obvious choice, like immediate.
Well, so the problem with the kicking stuff is that you would never you would never kick an extra point. You'd always go for 2, right? No. And so we'd miss out on those opportunities. And then the additional kicking rules is that you get points per yardage on kicks. Which I think when we had discussed it, we had accidentally made it double points for yardage because we did the 30 to 39. 40 to 40. Yeah. And that was by accident. And then we discovered it. And we were like, well, obviously we're going to keep that accident because that's funny because we're getting 200 points on some games. But like, you can't really do, so they're going to try something like that, I think, in the XFL, if I remember correctly. But they like have these rules, like you can't go backwards in order to increase the number of points. So like there is like, and you can't punt past a certain, so they're doing something along those lines. But it does create some unusual incentives. But are there other rules in the Hell League that
first thing I thought of was that if you pitch a shutout, you get 25 additional points. Oh. And I love that idea. Like just pile it on more.
Yeah, I love that. So you could have like a 100-0 game just by scoring 75. Easy.
Yep. And just not letting up anything. Nope. I think that works. I do want to run an Oops All Punters League next year, but I have to do that in like ESPN. But I do want to run an Oops All Punters League. So I'm going to need to find out with a couple of people to
like a 3-team league? I'm trying to figure out how you would make that work.
If you have, I'm trying to think if it'd be like a 2 or a 3 punter on a team.
Oh, okay.
Thing, and then you just spread it. But yeah.
Okay. And then maybe have like you can draft a punter can be drafted to 2 separate teams, and okay, sure.
Yeah, there's ways to make it work. But yeah. Oops only punters would be good. Charles asks, how many rounds would the draft need for a team to select each of you? This is awkward for me. It might be easier to figure you out.
Yeah. So I currently have not undergone back surgery.
Neither have I.
Yeah, technically neither of you. Although it was touch and go for a second there.
Touch and go multiple times. Yeah.
Yeah. So I did a little bit of math on this one, and I figure that obviously foreign players get drafted, right? But let's assume for a moment that they don't. And I figure there's about 6 compensatory picks per round, so 38 picks per round. And I figure 2/3 of the country easily clearing, right? Because they're like 60 and over, or they're babies, or they're like James and they're not medically fit necessarily for the NFL. I'm not medically fit either, but in a completely different, arguably more pathetic way. Because it's only my choice, right? That I'm not fit for the NFL, whereas other people are not fit for reasons outside of their control. So, but like a lot of people are just not fit for the NFL in a lot of different ways, right? And, I've got some upper body strength. I've got some lower body strength. I would say for my size, I'm slightly stronger than average, which for people who know my size is not saying a lot. Aside from the fact that I'm 7 feet tall, right? So like I could take Wemby, right? So I figure I clear 2/3, but not much more than that. So I took the country's population, multiplied it by 0.3, divided that by 38, and I got, there's about 2.9 million rounds, right? I figured the NFL knows me a little bit better than they know some random person in Idaho, right? I figure, I'm not 40, I'm not 50, I'm not 13, I'm not 8, right? So I'd say probably round 2 million or so, I think is, and then that's probably when I get my name called. But I'd like Rhett Ellison, I would be out fishing on a boat. I wouldn't get to the phone in time.
you don't even like fish normally, but for this particular moment,
for sure.
You're like, nope, I'm going on a boat. Question is from Mal, who asks, how is Jim Marshall not in the NFL Hall of Fame? Are we crazy? And does the Hall of Fame suck?
So I've looked into this a couple of times, and obviously there's like a bunch of reasons, right? Like one of them is that he's most famous for the wrong way run. But I think some of it is, and Luke Braun has done like a whole history of the Vikings, and so he's spoken about this too. And part of his argument is that Jim Marshall not quite as talented as some of the edge rushers from the era that it went in. But I think a lot of people will go off of like sack counting stats. And the thing is, he obviously has a ton because he was in the league forever. And so it makes it seem like he should be in, but he doesn't really have any postseason honors. And I think that's an issue with the way that we do NFL awards, because if you look at his sack totals from year to year to year, he was never really in the top 3 of sacks created in any particular year of the NFL. But over a 3-year span and over a 5-year span, he ends up near the top. And so you would think that there would be some consideration for that. And it'd be nice if we had like a rolling 3-year award system, which would be essentially impossible to enforce because they would all be impacted by recency bias and stuff like that. Like it would be cool abstractly if we had a rolling 3-year award for performance over 3 years, but mechanistically it would suck because I don't think I trust anyone to do it well. But like in a world where that happened, I think that he would have the type of postseason honors that would get him into the Hall of Fame. So I think some of it is the fact that he doesn't really have like any all pros. And does he have any Pro Bowls? Let me take a quick look. But like, let's see, Jim Marshall. But like, all you have was the total sack number, and then someone on the Hall of Fame, he has 2 Pro Bowls. So someone on the Hall of Fame committee would be like, well, why does he only have 2 Pro Bowls and no All-Star appearances or no All-Pro awards? And then that's kind of where the discussion shuts down, right? Like that's it. And I think that if you had like a 3-year award system, he would get more serious consideration, or a 4-year award system, or a 5-year award system. But it's just not going to happen because he has 9 sacks, 10 sacks, 11 sacks, 7 sacks, 8 sacks, 9 sacks, whatever, right? Like he had 1 year with 14 sacks, 1 year with 11.5 sacks, and that's it, right? Like, and you compare him to somebody like Alan Page, which in one way feels tremendously unfair to him, and in another way feels tremendously unfair to Alan because he was a defensive tackle, not an edge rusher. But like Alan Page has had more seasons of 11 plus sacks than Jim Marshall as a defensive tackle, right? And yeah, he's the greatest defensive tackle of all time, but like still, that's kind of screwed up, right? So I think that's really the big reason, is that he just never had the 1 year that people will point to and be like, wow, holy crap, that's incredible. That's the thing.
Let's go to a second jet has hit Drew Bledsoe, who asks, for a Reeves Romani Anguillus corner, Carson Wentz, sentenced to crucifixion by Pontius KOC, hath returned in some time that's divisible by 3. Hallelujah. What sins have been cleansed by his return, and how have you embraced him as your Lord and Savior?
Strangely, one of the few Carson Wentz questions I receive that Carson Wentz would be more offended by than me.
A true rarity.
Yeah, I don't think he appreciates this question. A second jet. No, obviously, no sins have been cleansed. He has not taken on the sins. He has not granted us. Is it forgiveness? Do we call it I don't know Christian theology all that well. I don't know if that's been made clear over the past 13 years of the podcast or whatever. Is it forgiveness? Is that what we get from Jesus dying on the cross for us?
I just want to let people know we have fully gone off the rails now. In case
really, how could you tell?
In case you hadn't noticed, we are in fact off the rails. Let's go to Kyle Segal, who asks, okay, first of all, how dare you? What gives you the right to just end Norse Code? You think because you're the hosts and the producers and the creators and legal owners of Norse Code LLC, and somehow that makes you almighty over the show? Huh? Yeah, that is what we think. We love you, Kyle. I still need to send him a jersey of a player. I can't remember. It was the guy. Who was the guy who there was a Vikings quarterback who never lost against Tampa Bay? Was it Case Keenum or was it somebody else?
I think that sounds like a Case Keenum stat, right? Because I think after the Tampa Bay game, someone brought it up.
Yeah.
That he just cooks against Tampa Bay specifically. But I can take a look at his career splits right now. Thanks to the newly designed Pro Football Reference website. I say that like I'm sponsored by them, and in a very technical sense I am, but like
in a normal legal sense you are not.
Right. 3 wins, 0 losses. So yeah, he's got a 100% win rate.
Cooks.
Yeah.
Yeah, good for him. I Hate Carmel, Indiana asks, I love that. Pittsburgh public schools are closing during the draft next month. Arif, is this a result of hiring too many local children to promote and update your big board?
Okay, so first of all, I don't employ child labor. Second, if I did, why would I employ specifically Pittsburgh area children to do that? Third, if I did employ child labor, in addition to this Pittsburgh question, why wouldn't I just have the tiny kids who are responsible for how AI works now do it instead?
You're just a big supporter of data centers now, not child labor. It's
not child labor. I don't. The Pittsburgh public schools thing, I think, is like a unique combination of like the traffic patterns in Pittsburgh and the way that they like bus kids to school or something like that. I don't know, but that is funny, and I wish it didn't happen. But yeah. I don't know.
Francis Ford Copium asks, for Arif's skill translation corner. While madnessing my March, I thought of all the stories of basketball players who've gone on to play in the NFL. Obligatory Antonio Gates reference. How translatable is a skill such as rebounding? And with that in mind, will you be jealous when James hooks up with a younger, sexier podcast host? I was updating my LinkedIn today, and I did include podcast stuff. So
incredible.
Who's to say?
The normalization of podcast culture has gone too far.
Oh God, absolutely. People with podcasts need to be stopped.
Okay, so how translatable is a skill such as rebounding? Not remarkably translatable. Otherwise, we'd see more Jimmy Grahams and Antonio Gateses, and it wasn't Rico Dowdle. It was like a Dallas tight end that had been in the Final Four. It's not that many, right? But I would imagine we'd be getting a lot more than we do. So I don't think it's actually that translatable. It's just fun and easy to communicate a particular element of playing football and liken it to grabbing a rebound. It's just a communication exercise, really. Like, obviously, footwork and ball tracking and all of that, there are related overlapping skills, right? Timing, jump height. But for the most part, not really. It's not really the same. And I think we'd see a lot more of it. It is maybe relevant that very often the best basketball players on a football team are tight ends, but I think that's just like a player size kind of thing. Like the tight ends are 6'6", right? Like it makes sense to me. But yeah, I would say that. Will I be jealous when James hooks up with a younger, sexier podcast host? I don't know. Was Dusty jealous when James and I started? I don't know.
Oh, we all started together in the same polycule, and then
we called it a 3-man centipod. Excuse me.
We did call it a 3-man centipod. You are correct. I forgot about that term, and now I am immediately I need a shower. Beeflo asks, for Arif's bullying corner, now that Chad Greenway's daughter has won the 5A state basketball tournament and committed to Kentucky, at what point do you have to consider her fair game to cyberbully? Will you wait until she begins her college career, or have you begun already?
This feels so dicey. Wow. I think she has to be in the WNBA, which, because of the WNBA's eligibility rules, I think she has to be like 22 at least, right? And I don't know, man. I haven't cyberbullied Chad Greenway in years, right? Years and years. In fact, I think most recently, actually, he more recently has cyberbullied me, right? So, like, because after he got that pic on his birthday or whatever.
Oh, well, yeah, and he's commented multiple times.
Yes.
On the Twitters about things about the connection to you before. So
yeah,
no, that's a thing. I did reach out to him at one point trying to get him on as a guest, much in the way to like in like the Luke Braun like surprise sort of way. I did attempt to do a version of that. It was like you had to pay X amount of money for charity. I tried to like arrange something, but it would have been fun to get Chad Greenway on. But
yeah.
In the same way that I've also tried to get Danucci on, it just didn't work out. Let's go to Beef Brewski, who asks, remember that rumor about Diggs spending Valentine's Day zipping between 2 hotel rooms? I think it was 3, but yeah. A different lady was in each room. Is Kevin O'Connell doing a similar thing with Kyler Murray and JJ McCarthy? We keep hearing he still believes McCarthy could be the guy, but he also reportedly told Murray he could see him as a franchise quarterback. Those ideas can both be true. You can love 2 ladies at the same time, but it's also true that those ladies might not be thrilled about the fact. Or is this Kevin O'Connell trying to avoid the mistakes that pushed Daniel Jones and Darnold into the arms of another team?
I feel like there's been a rapid increase in the amount of thruple and polycule related questions over the past year, and I have no idea why. It just keeps happening.
It's the future these liberals want. I don't know.
I love that love is in quotes for this question. You can love 2 ladies at the same. Wow. I guess I know your opinion on the matter. Beef Brewski.
He's talking like somebody who's been caught before.
Right, yeah. No, I love both of you. I promise. No, in different but unique and fully realized ways. Let's see.
Please put down the knife.
Yeah. We can keep hearing he still believes McCarthy become the guy, but he also reportedly told Murray he could see him as a franchise quarterback. Those could both be true, but it's also true that they might not be thrilled about that fact. I guess in a way, I don't think he's physically, flitting between multiple rooms to talk to McCarthy and Murray. And it does make the quarterback room itself a little bit awkward, but yeah, I think so. I think that this is like a classic, I've got 2 dates at the same time and they're at different restaurants. So I have to get up and go to the bathroom, but really I'm going to the other date type sitcom situation for him.
All right. I just looked at the clock and we need to make sure that you're able to be after dark here soon.
Yeah, no, I've been looking at the clock.
We've got a couple more questions here. Deez asks, I challenge you to a best of 3 VGC doubles in Pokemon Champions. You win. I don't mention you on social media, podcasts, or shows for 6 months. I win. The Sumo Corner returns for the next Basho. What do you say?
Well, first of all, you need to specify a lot of things. Open team sheet, closed team sheet. Which regulation of VGC would we be competing in? Also, will you be providing me with a Switch 2 in Pokemon Champions? I don't own either of those things. So there's a lot of problems here. Because you said in Pokemon Champions, so we can't do it in Showdown, right? I just feel like if I just wait you out, I win because the podcast is ending in a year. So I'm good. Why do I have to do this?
Yeah, just challenge Arif's high score in Pokemon Snap. It'll be fine. Football's Miss Andrus Niche asks, for a Reefs remember when corner, who would win in a fight, pirates or ninjas? I do not remember when. I was born in 2004.
What was Maddox's answer to this? Do you know?
I know many things about Maddox. I do remember that I don't want to.
I feel like he had an opinion on this. For people who don't know, I won't explain. It feels like it's way too difficult to explain. But internet personality before we had social media, I guess.
Had the greatest page in the entire universe.
Yeah.
It turns out he's just a dick.
Yeah, that was the whole shtick, it turns out, like, which you could not recognize. Well, I couldn't recognize when I was a high schooler, was that he is just a dick. And he had like a whole book about how he's like a dick. It was like the greatest book in the universe or something like that.
He was on a podcast. I listened to a podcast he was on for a while. And
what? That's crazy.
Yeah, it didn't go well. It does not look good in my listing of shows in the Apple Podcast app. That one still occasionally pops up.
So anyway, I think that this is like a terrain question, right? Boats, pirates; on land, ninjas; in the air, probably ninjas. I don't know who's better at flying fighter pilots, or flying fighters, but probably ninjas, right? So. Well, no, a vehicle. Actually, I'll go with pirates in the air. It's just very silly when I was a kid type fights. I think ninjas felt cooler, so people went with it. But like, pirates do have guns, right? Like that feels like a pretty big game changer in the classic loadout. I would imagine that the ninjas, as they operate now, ? Would have guns, but like in the classic imagining of both of these archetypes, pirates because they have guns, but generally I think this is like a terrain question. Like if they're in the woods, like the ninjas have it, right? So I don't know.
Yeah. Longing for a new bit asks, have you gotten any updates on how friend of the show Mahmoud Ahmadinejad is doing with the current unrest? Is he aware and thrilled with the most recent glory his Wolverines have achieved?
Man, I don't know how to break this news.
I'm checking the score of the hockey game right now.
I'll say that Ahmadinejad, friend of the show, glory to the U of M. I will say that he has either looked up or looked down at the score.
Oh my God, I think Denver's goalie is dead.
Wow, how apropos for an Ahmadinejad question. Next question.
Oh my God, he's not moving.
Oh wait, no, actually,
he got checked at the very like right when I pulled this up. It's on ESPN2. He is moving now. They're like the trainer is out there. He got hit hard against the goal. Yeah, he is.
He's moving now.
He is now. He was not. Like he looked like he had just taken a Peyton Manning hospital ball right across the middle of the field.
Good old Austin Collie.
Yep, he took an Austin Collie.
Over the middle, man. We need you to take this one, dude. We need 8 yards.
Okay, yeah, they're showing the replay right now. I know this is great podcasting stuff here. Oh. Yeah, that's Michigan. Michigan player checked the Denver goalie and bent his neck. Yeah, bent his neck in a way that should not be something. Hockey players are strong. But oof, that's not great. That leads us into the next question. Chandler asks for a Reefs theology corner. Michigan won the national championship in men's basketball. Wisconsin won the women's Frozen Four. The men's Frozen Four is Denver, Michigan, North Dakota, and Wisconsin. Sadly, North Dakota lost earlier, and I'm bitter. Is this proof there is no God? Yes. Or that there is one, he hates us all. James is not allowed to answer this question.
I feel like James got in some shots before he got to the part where James was not allowed to answer the question.
That's the best part.
I would say that if if there was a God and he hated us all, the Packers would have more than one ring in their insane quarterback run over the past however many years, right? Or two rings if you like going back to Favre. Like I think there would be more Packers rings in a world where God exists and hates us. I think this is just proof of the randomness of the universe and our ability to interpret patterns into it. Next question.
Yeah. Ice Delonda asks, question for Reef's podcasting corner. We're going to wrap up with this. With Norse Code LLC shutting down, I've begun listening to your new podcast, Locked On Vikings After Dark.
It's not a podcast, it's a stream.
You called it a podcast last episode.
I don't know.
I noticed After Dark, in a break from Norse Code LLC, is funded with advertisements, including a gambling and prediction market app and BetterHelp too, if I remember correctly. The advertising was successful, and now I am $200,000 in the hole. What bet would you recommend I make to get out of this?
You need therapy. Okay.
Additionally, I call the number. Additionally, my wife has a question for Arif Hassan's JD Corner. How would you design a lawsuit to make Arif Hassan, podcaster, liable for me, Ice Delonda Est, following Arif's advertisements and participating in the gambling and prediction market like he promoted? BetterHelp. There's a code.
These are all BetterHelp type questions.
you can handle that. After Dark has a BetterHelp thing. Just use the code from that. It'll be fine.
Yeah, I assume the code is like Locked On or Locked On Vikings. You're good. You'll get hooked up with like an anti-gay therapist like you've always wanted. Who is not certified to perform therapy in any state in the United States. It's great. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, Arif absolutely 100% endorses BetterHelp. So check that out. That is going to be the end of this episode of Norse Code. I hope you guys have enjoyed it, and check out BetterHelp.com. And the app, Arif, what do you have to plug?
Okay. I've got a Pro Bowl piece coming up that'll be publishing the morning that this podcast drops about players at pro days that looked good, and then I've got the consensus board coming up. I'll be comparing the consensus board to other consensus boards and their predictiveness. I'm going to be taking a look at the normal stuff like polarity and the evaluator versus forecaster boards and all that. So that's all coming up over at Wide Left. And then also there's a stream that some people have turned into a podcast, Locked On Vikings After Dark, which I will be recording in 15 minutes.
Yep. So for Arif, my name is James. Thank you guys so much for listening. And please remember that you never want to go full Puka Nakua. And we'll be back soon.